All right, let's talk about everyone's favorite punching bag if you're an analytics hater, and everyone's hero if you're an analytics fan, and that is Brandon Staley. And really, I want to talk about his fourth down decision making mostly. We'll touch on some other stuff. I want to kind of just evaluate his first year as a head coach performance, because I find it pretty fascinating, as he's definitely been very polarizing. Some people say it was a great success and the team would have not done anywhere near as good as they did without him. Some people saying that this was a Super Bowl contender that completely failed to meet expectations. Which one is it? Well, let's get into it. The first thing I want to really talk about, as I said, is these fourth down decisions. The fourth down decisions are a real, it's a lightning rod, and the math does check out that the fourth down decisions make sense. It does. In a vacuum, if both teams are equal in all these situations, the math checks out. However, let's talk about what the results said. I mean, people keep talking about, okay, you can't play football on a spreadsheet. Well, let's just look at what actually happened in each of these games. Did it actually help them or hurt them? So here we go. This is how we're going to do this. I know it's not the highest tech graphics there. My graphics department is still what I do on, literally I do everything either with Microsoft Word or Microsoft Paint. That's my thumbnails, Microsoft Paint. That's what we do. I'm an expert on that stuff. But anyways, what we're going to do is just go through each game that there was a fourth down decision that mattered. Some I've excluded because none of the fourth down decisions either happened or ended up mattering. And I talked about, okay, when they went for the fourth down, did it add points? Did it cost them points? And if it did, how much? So the first time against the Cowboys, it gave them 3 points, but they still lost by 3. Against the Chiefs, they gained 4 points on one of the fourth down decisions, but there was also a play that iced the game with a fourth down conversion towards the end of the game that not everyone would have gone for. So a 6-point win, you could make a debate as to whether or not that allowed them to beat the Chiefs that time or didn't due to the fourth down decision makings, but that's what happened. I also want to be clear here. What I am doing is really only when there's a honest conversation about whether they should have gone for it on fourth or not. So for example, if a team is down 7 points with 2 seconds left and it's fourth down, of course you're going to go for it there. So I wouldn't count that one. So just so we're aware there. The Raiders, they got a touchdown due to a fourth down conversion, and they won by 14. And then the Browns, they won by 5, and they had multiple touchdowns due to fourth down conversions in that game. So that gave them 14 points in a game they just won by 5 points. So that literally changed the outcome of a game for the better. So off to a pretty good start for the Chargers. Now, these next, chunk of games, not quite as good. Cost them 3 points against the Ravens. They still lost by 28, though, so not a big deal there. Against the Patriots, it gained them 4 points, although they would not be able to win that game anyways. The Steelers cost them 3 points, but they still won. And then the Broncos cost them 3 points, but they, again, lost by double-digit points there, so don't know how much that mattered. I think it's fair, if anything, is to say, well, given how the Broncos and Ravens games went, they needed to play more aggressive and put some points on the board. But still, you did cost yourself some points in this section. All right, so next chart here, this is the last of them, and these were the two real controversial ones happen. So, obviously, Bengals adding 6 points, winning by 19. No one cares about that. The first one, and the reason why I think these got so much attention, some people were saying it's just because it didn't work out. To me, I think it's because the Chiefs and Raiders games were just on prime time where a lot of people were watching. But first, the Chiefs overtime loss. This is where the fourth down decision making, if we're doing this exercise, cost them a victory. They, gained 4 points on one of their fourth down decision makings, but lost 3 points on 2 of their fourth down decision makings, and in doing that, this now means that that's a -2. Now, there's a pretty big asterisk here when it comes to this one. It's very much worth mentioning that there was also a goal line fumble here, so because of that, that is what resulted in, if they got the fourth down conversion, if they then capped it off with a touchdown, well, now it flips the other side. The Chargers win, and then, that didn't happen. But again, we're not doing ifs here. We're just talking results, and I think that's what's interesting about the exercise. For the Broncos, you have a 29-point win. It gave them 7 points, whatever. In the Raiders game, they lost in overtime, and a lot of people are saying, the Brandon Staley fourth down and 1 at the 19 cost them the game. Worth mentioning that earlier in that game, he could have kicked the field goal, went for it, they got a touchdown out of it, so they still came out ahead in terms of the results of that game. Losing in overtime wouldn't have happened, in theory. Again, doing this exercise, they would have lost in regulation, although Not exactly how that worked, but they would have gone for 2 at the end, but still. So the overall results here, they added 35 net points. So they went from if they didn't do this, they would go from the 5th best offense to the 12th best offense. That's if all the points were on offense, which is not the case, of course, because some of them were the defense's part. So it hurt their defensive stats a little bit, but helped their offensive stats a little bit more. But I'm including it all just adding to the offense is basically what I'm doing. So that's not exactly how it worked, but kind of just can show the jump of how much it helped his team to do these 4th down conversions, even if the exact results, maybe you could argue, didn't work out perfectly. But I still wouldn't make that argument, quite frankly. I think at worst, you could sit here and say it cost them 1 game and it won them 1 game, which is a push there, because it won them the Browns game. There's no denying that. And you could sit here and say it cost them the Chiefs' overtime loss, although I think you could say, well, the fumble after a successful 4th down conversion really is what happened there. But again, you can make that argument. I also wanted to talk about this chart for a second, just because I figured I'd throw this out there. It's not like the Chargers were the team that went for it the most. I mean, you look at this chart, the higher you are, this is, how likely you were to go for it. Worth mentioning that this is not including the postseason, and also this is not including when one team had less than a 20% chance to win, and it's not including plays that happened in the final 30 seconds of the game, because I think those are important to disrupt. The Chargers, again, they're high on this list. It's not like they're low or anything, but they were 9th, and so that's kind of the interesting thing, is someone like and Andy Reid, who no one thinks of as an analytics guru, they and the Chargers basically did the exact same thing. Now, the Chargers ended up going for it more than all these other teams, but they just had more opportunities to when you should go for it. They just had more opportunities. So that's another big part of it, I think. Now, I think this chart is kind of where Brandon Staley isn't getting the criticism that maybe he should. So it's not really a chart, just a stat. My projections using the PFF grades and then kind of my algorithm had the Chargers talent around 9.5 wins, which is, right about where they were at. They ended up with 9 wins. Although the one thing you could definitely criticize them for is 17th in defensive talent, but 28th in defensive points per drive. So that is a pretty decent jump. Given that he is a defensive head coach, I think it's fair to maybe point the finger a little bit and say, well, what's going on there? I mean, okay, the 4th down decision making, I like it. I think it makes sense. I think it's smart, and it helped the Chargers this year. Statistically, it helped the Chargers, and looking game by game, it helped the Chargers this year. Despite all the criticism, I think that was all good and smart. I think it's fair to have some criticisms about the defensive coaching. I mean, part of what Staley does is kind of by design lets you run on him, and I think that makes sense when you have Aaron Donald up front, which it's hard to run on the Rams. So when he did it there, I think it made more sense than the Chargers, who they don't really have a great team as a whole. The talent is mediocre, and their run defense is probably the weakness of that team. And so when you're taking a guy out of the box, makes things even more difficult. So the flip side is what I would say is, well, it was your first year. Let's give you some time now to build a talent around your scheme. People like to build a scheme around your talent. I get that. I don't hate that. And maybe for this first year, it's fair to criticize him for not doing that. But now that he's going into his second year, he'll have time to build a talent around the scheme. And we can see how that can work out. And also worth mentioning, if you go for it on 4th down more, your defense is going to look worse to some degree. That's also going to happen. But the offense looks better because of that, and even more better than the defense looks worse. That's the whole philosophy. So it's interesting stuff. I like Brandon Staley. I want guys who think differently in the league. I don't want everyone to think one way. So it's nice to have different guys think in different ways. It's cool how Brandon Staley thinks. He's interesting. I think he's good for football. And I like it. I think it's smart. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.